Hey everyone, this is the Love of Cinema podcast. We like to talk movies. If you like to talk movies too, you come to the right place.
Manto's shadow is somewhere there on Rudra's track. Manto has somehow walked into this genre in that sector because a lot of Indian spies actually used to take shelter in brothels because they were visited by army officers, the rival army officers, and somehow they used to find shelter there. There are actual existent accounts of certain Indian spies from Pakistan who actually, befriended somebody in a brothel.
Hey folks, this is Himanshu and you're listening to the Love of Cinema podcast. Since its early days, Hindi cinema has always had a special place for hard-hitting films that raised questions about society at large, films that questioned our politics, films on social issues. Right from V. Shantaram's films on social reform from the 1930s to the films of today, like this year's Sherni. Over the years, of course, the style of these films has transitioned from a more melodramatic one to one that feels more authentic, more real. In recent times, D-Day, Pink, and Raid are three films which fall somewhere in that space. Films which also stand out for their meticulous research, sharp dialogue, and feel timely. I'm sure there are others as well, but I picked these three because all three films made a strong impression on me the first time I watched them, and they continue to hold my attention every time I watch them again, which led me to seek out their screenplays. I found the screenplays compact and engaging, and I took notes. All three screenplays were written or co-written by Ritesh Shah. Ritesh is an award-winning acclaimed screenwriter who has also written several other films like Airlift, Madari, and Force. Ritesh also wrote dialogue for Kahani and Kahani 2. But before moving on, a quick request to all the listeners of the podcast. If you enjoy organic conversations centered on Indian cinema, Love of Cinema podcast was created for people just like you. So do consider subscribing. Independent podcasts like this one don't have a platform ecosystem for amplification and distribution. Independent podcasts rely on amplification through its listeners. So if you like the episode, please do spread the word on social media. Also, please do take a minute to review and rate the podcast. That would be much appreciated. Back to today's episode. I'd been wanting to have Ritesh on the podcast ever since I read those screenplays. Finally, it happened, and I got a chance to pick his brain on those screenplays. We talked about screenwriting and dialogue, using as examples scenes and characters from these three films. Scenes like the Alvida sequence from D-Day, Rishi Kapoor's monologue at the very end of D-Day, the cop's cross-examination scene from Pink, and characters like Advocate Deepak Sehgal and Rudra Pratap Singh. Ritesh also shared how much of Pink was what he had observed around him living in Delhi, how Raid draws upon two real IT raid cases, and why it's important to give your villain and hero both shades of grey. We also chatted about Salim-Javed and a couple of Ritesh's favorite screenplays, namely LA Confidential and October, written by Juhi Chaturvedi. Here's our chat. Welcome on the podcast, Ritesh. How are you doing?
Thank you, Himanshu. I'm doing well. I hope you're doing great too.
I'm doing great. And in the spirit of a popular line from D-Day, Trigger Keech, Mamla Mat Keech, let's dive right into the films that we plan on talking about today.
We won't stretch it. Nahi khichenge. We'll just...
Namely, D-Day, Pink, and Red. Those three films, I just picked those three films because, first of all, I like those films. And secondly, just in the interest of time, I know you have written a lot other films as well and television as well. But I just wanted to concentrate on, a couple of films, two or three films, so that, we could really kind of dive deep into the screenwriting and the dialogue part of it. So let's start with D-Day. And I wanted to open our discussion on D-Day with Goldman's monologue at the very end, just before getting shot. Screenplay wise, it's a classic moment of conflict, which always makes for great dialogue, as they say. And it's a monologue where Goldman name drops everybody, from Rajdeep and Burkha to Arnab and Salman Khan. Could you walk us through your process using this particular example for writing hard hitting, no punches held variety of dialogue?
Yeah, I think it largely follows from your own cynicism because, if you follow news or events, they never really work out to at least a writer's satisfaction. I don't know whether to the average man's satisfaction also, in the sense that this guy gets caught, he's tried, everybody lives happily ever after. That's not a sense of life that any of the writers of that film had. I mean, not that writers do generally, but there are some things with which you can be optimistic, especially if it's based on real life, where it could have turned out well. And we're going to talk about another movie in this context where probably it did turn out well in one case, and in one case it didn't. And there was at least one truth to live by, which we combined for what you aspire to arrive at, which is a surprising yet satisfying climax. I mean, that's what most screenwriters, to paraphrase William Goldman, that's what we aspire to do. That this is how the ending should be. In this case, I mean, we knew that there are such cases, and there will probably be long drawn out trials, media trials, and yet we wanted him to provoke somebody enough so that it's not a classical. I mean, you do all the hard work and you bring this guy, then why would you want to kill him? And uh, so we are wording it in such a way that he really drives you to do that, and he especially insults for Arjun's character. At least he insults Wali Khan's memory, which is the part which was played by Mr. Irfan Khan.
Right.
So we knew that it's not going to be to anybody's satisfaction, and it's a clandestine operation. There are not going to be any medals anyway, and there's a possible visual that Nikhil had in mind that he and his pink shaded classes, they get buried in the sands of Kutch, and that's how it ends. But Suresh is also, he was a political cartoonist at one point of time. He used to do this sarcastic pieces around politics. I am also not interested in it as a participant, but I'm a huge consumer of print media. So one was referencing things that were happening at the time. There is a bit of cynicism in it. There is a bit of provocation in it, and uh, it also makes it decisive for Arjun's character. I mean, he triggers him enough for him to do that. So, combination of many things, a combination of what is practically available to you as an ending in that script, but there is a bit of personal, call it politics, call it your worldview, call it your own sort of ethics. So it's a combination of reacting to things around you as well as what is available there in the script in terms of choices. So you see it as a monologue. Of course, Suresh and I had a bit of a reluctance towards it because we are more subdued. But Nikhil's whole point was that, it's not the 95% which you wrote, but it's the 5% which I asked you guys to write, which got us money to make that film. But even keeping in mind that, okay, yes, it is the 5% that has got us the money, but you still tend to write it in a manner that, which is satisfying, at least that, uh, is well put by Goldman. I mean, so that, I guess, was the process behind it, and eventually how we arrived at it with a bit of fine tuning, of course.
And was there any specific reason behind code naming Iqbal Goldman?
He went by many aliases. I mean,
Okay.
if you're referring to Goldman was one such alias. There were
Okay.
many other aliases. we somehow it was a lesser known alias, so probably that
Right.
determined the
Oh, so
choice.
this is one of the aliases that he had used.
Absolutely, it was one of the aliases being used at through the course of time.
Okay, I see. Another favorite bit from D-Day that I wanted to talk with you is the whole Alvida sequence, where the audience, along with Rudra Pratap, kind of relive Surayya's final moments. And that's set to the beautiful Alvida song. And I noticed in the shooting draft, you have referenced In the Deep by Bird York from the soundtrack for Crash. Could you unpack for us why you decided to, first of all, write that sequence so that we get to relive Surayya's murder? And also, if you could talk about the In the Deep reference.
See, I think that's something that Nikhil used, and he would probably have a better idea about it. In the script, if you notice, it's written as a sequence. There was a similar sequence I had written in an earlier movie called Force, which was directed by Nishikant Kamath. And Nikhil had happened to see that sequence where originally it took the style of Godfather, but we didn't just jump place, we jumped time also. So here is a sequence in which there is the past, there is the present, and as well as your jumping places as well. So it's written as a 4-page sequence, but eventually Nikhil decided to put a song to it. And initially I was kind of horrified that how can a song fit into what has been essentially written as a sequence which jumps time and place. And he was like, you just wait for me to finish it and I'll tell you how. And then he came and he shot it, he edited it, he put the song in the background and they played with motion, obviously. And then he showed it to me and Suresh, and it was a surprise to us also. It was never written as a song sequence. And that, to his credit, remains a lot of people's favorite sequence in the film. They obviously like the song, but they like the sequence as well. But I think the reason for that is that it's not a choreographed song. It's actually a sequence written with an edit pattern in mind. And somehow the use of a background song has kind of made it a very memorable sequence, because we also completely bought the idea that yes, it does work with the song too.
And I guess that also kind of works as a trigger for Rudra Pratap, right? Because he's that kind of is an additional boost for him that he's now going to now go after them.
Yes, in Hindi films for long, there is a kind of a feeling, not in every film, but there is a certain point or height towards which the visual and the dialogue can take you. But somehow, if you have a crazy song, it just enhances the emotion far more. So I think Alvida, because the song is very soft, the visuals are, gruesome, they're terrifying. There's a bit of dialogue happening. He's reliving her death. So I think, yeah, that it just really enhanced that section of the film.
And I noticed that overall the film is pretty quote unquote brave. In the sense that it does, like I said, it takes names and it doesn't try to conceal, or it doesn't try to cloak some of the harsh realities. And we know that this is it can get it can become a sensitive topic. What kind of a free hand did you guys have from the producers in terms of what you could say and everything, or?
Completely, because see, this is the first film Nikhil actually turned producer for, along with his two partners. This was the first film which was co-produced by them. So there was absolutely no pressure during the whole writing of the film at all.
Okay.
So the idea was to do a film which, in this genre, because we had seen spy genre done in India, and we all know that this is not how the whole business of espionage works. So we wanted to do, from what Suresh and I had read, we wanted to do a espionage film in which it really happens in an Indo-Pak context. And there are actual accounts available from the 60s right till the 90s from people who were actually incarcerated there, or who came across, or who were later released. And there are so many actual accounts, mostly in Hindi, though not so many in English. We wanted to visit that world. We wanted, the only condition actually was put by Suresh and me. We were like, please, let's not have laptops opening and SpySat images, because it doesn't really work out like that. and we have a tough time handling domestic terrorism. So if we had that equipment and those kind of buildings, this really wouldn't be happening. So in fact, we put the conditions that it's got to be the way it is, and a lot of it actually, barring some key tropes, I mean, which were used for the purpose of fiction. There was a long Mariana Babar article written in Outlook, but which actually came from across the border. So there were things that existed in the stratosphere of information. We just needed to put it down in the fictional structure that we had created, and a lot of the rawness is there because principally both with writing and then also with the way the action is designed and the kind of costume and the cast that has been selected, it just comes together to give you a non James Bond kind of an interpretation of, not that it isn't interesting. I mean, James Bond is fantastic, but that had already been done. We wanted to do something in a Hindi film space which kind of rang true, and when something rings true, people really like it. They
Right.
do see that perhaps this borrows a lot from life. Maybe these guys know a bit more than us. That truth always has a connect somehow. For now, I mean, it might be feel one of those things which has been done, but for 2012, the year that it was actually written in, I think it was a step ahead for this genre at least. I knew, of course, then people would come and improve upon it, but for 2012, I think it was a credible script. I mean, in this genre at least.
Definitely, yeah, yeah, and it hasn't aged at all. So that speaks towards that. What were your references, Ritesh, when you were writing the screenplay for this particular film? Like you said, that you didn't want to do anything that was cliched and kind of a run-of-the-mill mainstream stuff in terms of espionage or spy thrillers. But did you have any specific books or movies that you were thinking about, like Zero Dark 30 or anything like that, or?
Not movies. It was obviously the pivotal incident when it all started. Was, I think it was Osama bin Laden being
Sure.
taken
Right.
out. I think that operation largely inspired it. That I think the day it happened is when, or the next day is when Nikhil actually called me and Suresh and said that he wanted to do something in the espionage space in an operation like this. There are, of course, as I have told you, that there is a book called "मैं Pakistan में भारत का जासूस था." It's a Hindi book published by Raj Kamal. There are actual accounts of, say, the Black Panther, Ravinder Kaushik, and so many other details of, say, Ajit Dwal, or the operations that have taken place before India kind of dismantled the structure during I.K. Gujral's time as Prime Minister. Then, as I told you, there's a long form article. I think it was a 7 or 9 page article written by Mariana Babbar, I think, from Pakistan. It was published in Outlook. That apart, we met we met the ex-chief of RAW, and then some active personnel were consultants during the shooting of the film. There are key ideas that have been taken from them. For example, it was like, why would I bother and break a person's neck when you can just break his finger and put him in equal amount of pain? So a lot of tactical choices were made based on people who were ex-R and AW. Then, of course, in terms of newspaper articles and a lot exists there in that form. But these three, four these were the three, four main key books or material which formed the base of writing of D-Day. That apart, I mean, there is sort of not a direct reference, but Manto's shadow is somewhere there on Rudra's track. Manto has somehow walked into this genre in that sector because a lot of Indian spies actually used to take shelter in brothels because they were visited by army officers, the rival army officers, and somehow they used to find shelter there. There are actual existent accounts of certain Indian spies from Pakistan who actually, befriended somebody in a brothel, then kind of used that network to gather information on that prospective targets.
Interesting, interesting. Moving on to Pink, Ritesh, there's a lot of things that are going on in this wonderful film, and so I just wanted to, kind of pick and choose a few scenes, and I just wanted you to kind of again unpack that for us and kind of try to give us an insight into your process. So the first one that I had in mind was, one of the crucial scenes from the film, which is the lady cop's cross-examination by Sehgal. It's an intense scene with Bachchan on all eight cylinders. Could you talk about your approach to baking in the intensity of such scenes without making them, over the top melodramatic and quote unquote filmy?
First, you need to simulate in your own head that what must have really happened. I mean, how would that case turn into this case? So you know some of the tricks of the trade, that how would they have backdated the case, where would they have put on the entry. Now, for that, you need to know what a police diary looks like and what is the process from that to go into an FIR and things like that. And then get into that person's mind that was been bribed and would have made certain alterations. And then you yourself simulate a scenario that, okay, she must have done all this. Now we need to catch her on this. What is the kind of a preparation a defense lawyer would actually do? He would try to find where she exactly at that time. He'd probably have gone to a mobile phone company, bribed out a CDR, asked them what the tower location was at this point of time. So every person, even if he's a government officer, as you must have, if you've been following news, that however smart you might be, you do end up making mistakes. And those mistakes, somebody else, somebody who's well versed with the legal world, will be able to pick up. But the tendency of the lawyers is never to bowl the Yorkers or the swingers up front. They give you loose half volleys outside your ops. They're bowling on the eighth stump. They let you slick in. They get you where you feel really confident or overconfident. And then they start the next over or the next few deliveries. They're going to zip in a bit. They're going to swing away from you. And the moment you kind of show them a gap between bat and pad, that's when they're really going to move in. So it also, what it does for the film or the particular sequence is that it ends up giving the sequence within the film, that beginning, middle, and an end, the slow setup of the film structure, the midpoint where it kind of peaks up and it can go either way, and then towards the climax. So if you keep the scene starts looking like this because you're aware of the system, the way the reports are filed, and what you can catch on. It touches its middle because you're able to convince the audience that it wasn't that silly a mistake, but somebody has caught on to it. And then you bring in the dramatic flourish to make it enjoyable for the audience also. Because if you look at the whole film as such, I mean, the audience is largely tense. They're not breathing. They haven't laughed at all. They have not been made easy at any point. This was a space. I mean, initially, except for me, everybody was kind of reluctant to put a sequence of that nature in a film like that. But we all know, like with life, like with such cases, there are some moments like this which happen during trial. And in life also, when you have an episode which is essentially tragic, or which is where the whole period might be melancholic in nature, but there are bits when you kind of chirp up or brighten up. So I think as a sum total of all these things, why that sequence works, plus the girl who played the sub inspector, I think she was just brilliant.
She
there
was
was an
terrific. Yeah.
there was an amount of nervous energy which was operating because she was acting opposite Mr. Bachchan for the first time. And I remember after 2 or 3 takes, she said that I'm so happy that witness box is not shaking because I'm performing from here as in waist up, but my legs are trembling. So there is a great. Also, it's not the sequence is not cut. It was being shot live by 6 cameras. So they're literally performing live energy as if it were a theatrical production. So because nobody is disturbing the performances, that's why I think it's also very feels very natural because there's no cutting. It's a live 9 or 10 odd minute sequence being just covered by cameras. Nobody's calling cut, lighting is not changing. They're just performing almost live for the camera.
And why did you say that there was initially resistance for you to put in this particular scene?
Because largely, see, the kind of films that have come from that production house, I mean, barring certain instances, there was that fear that perhaps this is not in sync with the temperament of that. Like sometimes it may tend to feel that this is crafted. This might sound like dialogue bazi, but and then eventually everybody went with that. That okay, no, let's actually shoot it. Let's see how it pans out, and it came out well. So it was obviously retained in that exact fashion.
Oh yeah, yeah. It feels absolutely real and instinctive. So, I mean, it really came out well. And of course it helps that, you have Bachchan in the frame because he who can really push on the intensity pedal.
Also, when it's on paper and I'm just reading it, maybe it might sound, because of my own delivery or the way I read out scripts, could have it might have sounded melodramatic, but once the players are performing it, I think it just fits in very nicely with the palette of the film and feels real also, because I mean they're emoting well. I mean, she really looks caught. She's embarrassed with her pictures at a wedding. She lies about her driving fast. She feels all those things. So it just makes it much more real than what it is on paper.
Makes sense. Another thing that I like about Pink is that, in the end, perhaps it drives home the point, really hard. But throughout the film, I mean, it's making that point at, so many instances. Like, here's an example which I had in mind. When the neighbor, Gupta ji, is being cross-examined, Sehgal tells him, nahi mein magar ki gunjaish hi nahi hai, which is the very crux of the film. But I like that line and that scene a lot because it shows how much the collective society at large, like the neighbors, are just as culpable in what happens with the girls. Because one way of thinking about it is Rajveer's attitude towards women is essentially an uglier kind of an extension of the society's same kind of regressive attitude towards women. My question to you was it a conscious decision to kind of, keep on, threading this throughout the movie, or this just happened because, it's so prevalent in the society? I mean, it's just so prevalent around us.
Yeah, absolutely. It is the reality. This particular scene where the neighbor has been shot is an actual neighborhood in Delhi where it has been shot. And if it were a normal day in your or my or any girl's life, he would be there doing the same thing that he's doing exactly in the film, and he would have turned up in the court and said exactly the same things. It's very very prevalent. But the film, if you notice that, I mean, it's cleverly disguised as a thriller courtroom drama, but the fact of the matter is it's an agitprop, it's a propaganda film. It's clearly a consent film. And that is what it eventually, like the writers are very conscious of what it is about. Not that it's not happening in life or we are creating something just to aid the theme. It is prevalent, and it's a world that exists, and the world of the film is also exactly like that world which exists outside. So all through this, if you see a smattering out of it, I don't know how conscious it is. Maybe it's in the subconscious, because we know that this is what the neighbor does outside the window. This is like what he's likely to say in court, and this is what largely people believe also. I mean, if you were to simulate the film, if you were to make three girls live in a neighborhood in Delhi or in any place in a certain way, and after 7 days if you were to take a camera and question the residents, so a lot of it would happen exactly like the way it happened in film. And these ideas, they are not thoughts. I mean, they're not dialogue. I did not have to craft them or pick them or choose them. These are things I've heard being said, and uh, I've just noted them down for you as an audience. I mean, everything that uh, everything which in the film you might tend to call dialogue is actually factual conversations and while eavesdropping on people, what I've heard, seen, and felt, and they're just simply recorded almost as if they're documenting the events which happened with either me or a friend or somebody I know, or with the director or the producer or the cast or the crew. That's what you're seeing. Is it consciously building? Does that line there, nahi mein magar ki gunjaish nahi hai? Is it setting it up for the big theme? Subconsciously, maybe, but not consciously. We're just trying to simulate reality throughout.
But it also beautifully fits in because it does feel natural. At some points, it does feel like, that's like you said, you're trying to make a stand on this particular issue. So, but yeah, I mean, that was my whole question. Like, was it really part of that you're trying to make this stand? Or is it subconscious? And like you said, probably it was subconscious. So that makes sense. The courtroom action also ends on a very beautiful note, I thought, where the lady constable shaking hands with Sehgal. And that's, again, such a powerful visual. It's just a visual, there is no dialogue. But boy, does it pack a punch or what? What can you tell us about that powerful scene?
I think, see, because the whole action is being covered, and as I said, we have been simulating the whole process of what would happen. Now, there was a clear assumption that, I mean, inside the khaki uniform, there is a woman that exists who's heard all this debate, right? It would have affected her somehow. How, without getting filmy, uh, would she express that she would like to thank this guy for his arguments, or that she understands them, or she would like to acknowledge the argument? This was how we felt that it would be best expressed without, dialogue, without some flowery gesture. I mean, just a nod could do it, shaking hands could do it, just raising your hand and saying, something of that. And then you throw the idea to the cast, and it just plays out. All you need is to just record that moment.
Deepak Sehgal's character, wanted to discuss that with you. He's an old man that's dealing with his own issues. His wife is hospitalized. He himself has had a history of mental health, if I remember correctly. And how much of that characterization do you think was important in having a person like that fighting for the girls in the courts?
See, again, as I said, everything was just kind of simulated. There used to be a high court lawyer who used to live opposite the house where I did my schooling in Delhi. It was a place called Sarupri Vihar, and it's been named as such in the film also. So it was literally diagonal from that balcony like we were. Now there are these three girls, and they have gone through something tumultuous. If you noticed a perfectly healthy person without any issues, you can easily guess where the dramatic trajectory is. If you set up a high profile, well to do lawyer, you know
Hmm.
it's going to be. And then the second thing was that, then, of course, on that side, there could be an even high profile lawyer. What is special about the story? How will it unfold? So the idea was that if somebody has been hurt in the opposite nest, and whether they're fledglings or birds, what if there's an equally broken bird on the opposite tree? Wouldn't it be interesting that although he's broken, he would like to try and mend the opposite nest, and in that kind of process get back to life, or find some meaning, or find some purpose, without actually actively looking for it, because things are so pat in our films that everything has to have a purpose. And like, a lot of people asked us that what is the purpose of having a dying wife, and I was like, no, there is no purpose. Old people might have dying wives in the hospital. It's just his life. There is no purpose to it. Then why did she die? She died because she was ailing. So the choice of somebody not so perfect, I think, the idea was also to have somebody that, because he's imperfect, maybe he, he, he doesn't have the same judgment as other people in the society would have of them, because his whole thing
Interesting.
is, do you think a guy in that capacity would like to judge people? I mean, he has his own issues. He knows life doesn't turn out to be the way it is. He probably has some family somewhere in the US. Maybe the children are gone. He, he, he is a different guy. He's staring at people for an entirely different reason. He's not part of that crowd. Probably that's why he has that insight to say all those things. A long life lived also, spend a lot of time in the court. He knows all the tricks of the trade, which people use in such cases. But he's somebody who's probably not in a position to judge. So he's probably in a great position to understand that what is the merit of its son's judgment.
Yeah, I loved all the staring that he does too. I mean, it's it kind of reminds you that it's out there, and if you just stand and stare for a minute, or you will notice all these things, that are the ugly realities of the society that we live in. And it at first, when you're watching the film for the first time, it feels a little bit creepy that he's like just staring at people. And
Would have been actually doing that at that point of time. He would not know what is going to happen to this girl. It's just a random guy who's kind of deranged, and he's looking at somebody in a certain fashion. You can't interpret that look. You don't know. There was an earlier line in a version which we didn't use, that this man actually confesses to his therapist that he's been staring at this girl in the park. And this therapist very casually says that, it's interesting that you feel that it's not right, but half of Delhi does the same, and they don't even know they require treatment. At least you do. So I think it was very interesting not to have a perfect guy, because then you would kind of figure this movie out very easily.
right, right. And plus, I mean, like you said, I mean, in reality, nobody's perfect, right? I mean, they all have their flaws, and there are imperfections, just peppered around everywhere.
But he's not judging them, that's for sure. I mean, it doesn't matter to him.
Ritesh, I think Raid, your film with Ajay Devgan and Saurabh Shukla, would make for a good discussion for what I wanted to ask you next. One of the exercises that many screenwriting courses often have students do is to write a hero and a counterpart adversary, right? I mean, and the adversary needs to seem unbeatable and unconquerable and all that. Can you share with us how you went about writing Patnaik and Tauji, the hero and the adversary, from the movie Red? And while you do this, I want you to put on your screenwriting coach hat for a minute, so that it might be instructional a bit for people who are aspiring screenwriters.
Is he totally the wrong guy for that? I mean,
Why do you say that?
because I have not trained professionally as a screenwriter, although I must have read
Okay.
almost every book possible which is available on screenwriting, and I still read, and in fact, I still read blogs and articles to see, if I can do it. But when I'm doing it, as I've told you, that my process is probably not that of a screenwriter, but more of a chronicler who's just pilfering from life and books and articles, and he's just serving them to you in an acceptable screenplay structure. So again, uh, it's totally inspired by the way the income tax rates ran in the 80s. Uh, the officer himself has been inspired from a real life person. Some of the body weight that has been added to is from these series of magazine covers that used to be there in the 80s, whether it was India Today or Dharamyuk, which would feature these officers. I remember there was one particular cover where there were two police officers on the cover, and they were featured as people who have been transferred 57 times in 3 years or 61 times in 3 years, how they pack, how they unpack. And similarly, the kind of uh, people who were actually raided. Raid is a combined story of two big raids, one which happened in UP and one which happened in Hyderabad. The UP raid ended very badly. These officers had to be rescued, just like the pre-climax of raid. by their colleagues from the IPS from an orchard where they were actually their bones were broken and they were rescued by their IPS counterparts. While as the Hyderabad one was a successful one, which resulted in this long haul. So it combines of several real life politicians, one from there and one from here. So the body, the family structure of one politician is taken, and the net worth of somebody else has been added to him. And because you know that world of, again, shot very close to where this actually took place. uh, so you know these people. I mean, you know their family structure, you know their ideology, you know how they function. So you take Amay Patnaik's character, and he has the attributes of all these real life people. He even references the kind of education he has had, the kind of textbooks that were there at that time. So you know where he's from, what is he out to do, what was the structure, and what was the governance of that time. Were they supportive of these officers? So you know Amay Patnaik's world very well, and you know the machinery on that side, how it works, and you obviously understand the what are known in that circuit as Bahubali politicians, as in who are, or politicians who came in it through the muscle and then built power. Uh, but it was the 80s, if you remember, that's where the case is from. It also had very peculiar family structures, which the Hindi film villain or the villain no longer has. I mean, he has a sense of betrayal, also being betrayed by his own family. But they are only doing what he has taught them to, make money in this world somehow, even if it means cheating their brother. So you know the kind of power that man believes that he has, and you also know what he doesn't have that the other guy has, and you pit them together. uh, if you remember, there was a early Premchand story called Namak Ka Daroga, which during the salt tax laws pits a powerful salt inspector against a very powerful trader. This was the 30s. Life hadn't changed till the 80s in these parts. So the daroga or the inspector or the custom officer or the police officer or the IT guy has the power of the rule book. And the other guy has everything else. He has muscle, he has money. If you pit them together in one haveli, this is likely what would have happened in the 80s. So, as I said, I'm just chronicling real life stuff and putting it into a dramatic structure. There is no, uh, there was no conscious effort to create a very powerful adversary and a hero. It's just that you know these things instinctively because these people exist. Uh, a bit keying up the flame here and there might have happened to make the perfect hero and make the perfect antagonist, but largely a sort of a plastic surgery. I mean, you have different parts of an officer and you have reconstructed him on the operation table and then put life into him and send him out, and done the same with the villain, and then just kind of uh, put the antagonist and the protagonist in a space where they clash over an income tax rate.
And in a film like this, how important do you feel as a writer it is to add shades to the hero and the antagonist instead of making them, white and black? Is it important to make them gray?
I think very very important with the protagonist's character. There is no space to add those grays because he's not functioning out of that particular space. I mean, you barely see him anywhere else. Uh, uh, well, he drinks cheap rum. If I mean, he's no holier than thou guy. Smokes, and that's just about what everybody used to do in the 80s, including doctors. But some of them had a very, very strong moralistic sense. Remember, this is when many people joined the forces fresh out of Amitabh Bachchan's films, there was a lot of idealism at that time. And it still exists even now. You'll be surprised with examples from IPS, IAS, and customs, where people just won't bend down, they won't accept a bribe. They are the archetypal, honest officer. But with the villain, extremely important to give him shades, because I mean, this is just a bad guy, picks up a gun, shoots the guy, no fun. So he tries to negotiate his way. I mean, first of all, he thinks his books are proper. It's the family which is, kind of betrayed him. In the sense that my both my uncles are actually chartered accountants. So one of them once told me that the difference between an honest politician and a dishonest politician is a good CA or a bad CA. So he could not have been an outright guy who just uses muscle to get over it. He would try to use his connections. He has his own life. He has his family. He has his opinions. Language is a very important weapon in the hands of powerful people in those parts. They have a way of putting things across. The guy should have a sense of humor. The guy should have some crazy gay sense of abandon. Like when he thinks he has had it covered, he just gets drunk and sings childhood songs on a jhula because he thinks he has got it covered. So yeah, you really, and then the actor, Saurabh Shukla is such a fantastic actor. He'll bring in his own things.
Absolutely.
But 80% of the film is on a single location. I mean, if the guy doesn't have shades, you'll have a dead film. I mean,
Right.
very difficult to make films like this work.
They're more like stage plays or theater because you're limited with the.
It's a box set drama, and there's nowhere else to cut. There's an actual raid happening in a house. What else do you do except to make the people interesting?
Ritesh, let's talk about screenwriting and dialogue now more in detail. What's your advice on developing skills for judging ideas for stories? Because constantly as a screenwriter or a writer just in general, you're always judging ideas that you have, right? Because you're going to have a million ideas during the day. So how do you develop that skill? How do you go about that?
I think there are two huge factors. One is novelty, in the sense that as much as it's possible, one should try and find a subject, especially in mainstream cinema, where at least most of it should feel like that, no, I haven't seen this in a film before. Like, I can give you examples from my own work, in the sense that I knew there were courtroom dramas, but I was sure there was not a film on consent. I knew there were films about honest officers and politicians, but I was sure there was nothing around a long running income tax raid. I knew, for example, for Airlift, that we didn't have a film about uh, a rescue from a country in midst of war. Or in case of D-Day, I knew that espionage films have been done, but not in this space. Novelty is a big factor in getting a film to be greenlit, because eventually you can't just publish a screenplay, right? The film has to be made. So novelty is a huge factor. In absence of novelty, it must have some great truth, in the sense that I don't mean a true story, but it must have some truth which is compelling you to write it down. That this I must express this feeling. It is truthful, it's honest, it's earnest, it's heartfelt. So two things will usually, take somebody's attention towards your script. Like if I'm reading, say, a log line or a synopsis, the first thing likely to attract me to is novelty. That, hey, haven't really seen this in our space or their space or anybody's space. But if I feel that this is not so novel, it's just a story about a father and son, and I've seen it hundreds of times. But once I move into, let's say, the first, even if I move from the log line to a synopsis, and I feel, though, no, there is something compelling in it. There is a father son, there's a shade or a strand of a father son relationship which has not been explored yet. it might be great fun, or it might be the screenplay might be very touching. Maybe he has done something in the screenplay, and if you get a sense of that in the 10-15 pages, that this world of father and son that he has taken me to, and the feeling that he wants to express is very touching. I would go for these two things probably: a strong sense of novelty, or a strong sense of an emotion that the writer has been able to feel and communicate well.
And are those same kind of things that you would pick if I were to ask you, tips on increasing your chances of hooking the attention of a star or a star director? Or is there some other way of looking at that?
Star directors, I think these two things should suffice. Of course, it also now takes a director into an account, because that person has had his whole upbringing, reading, psychology is very very different from yours. So what is good for one director may not be great for another director. But novelty and a deep sense of emotion, or something, a political belief, philosophy. These are strong differentiators. Uh, in terms of attracting an actor, it's largely the arc and the way their journey and their obstacles play out. That's what is more attractive to them. I have had screenplays rejected by actors where they have actually said that it's a writer and a director's film. What am I getting out of it? By that, he means that it's a great film, but it doesn't have a great part for me. It will just showcase your skill sets, not mine. For them, a great arc with uh, obstacles, and them managing to overcome those obstacles, highlighting their heroism, those kind of things would work.
The
But
journey of
for
the character, right?
But for directors and writers, I feel a great theme or a novel theme is what usually strikes a chord.
Okay. And Ritesh, which screenplays do you admire? And can you tell us the reasons why you admire those screenplays? And I was going to ask you to pick a couple, perhaps one of your favorite Hindi films and one of your favorite American films.
For Hindi, I would like to pick up October. The screenplay is by Juhi Chaturvedi. It's something that touched me really really deeply. I knew that this is a fictional world, that this guy Dan doesn't exist, and it's been written by Juhi, who I know. It's been directed by Shujit, who I know. But I still found myself thinking about the protagonist of the film, and even the girl in the hospital. uh, so it just moved me very deeply. I thought a very interesting choice of subject. Explores the idea of empathy, not even romance. So something truly novel in terms of theme. Great characters, great dialogue, very very sedated. Something I don't believe I can write at all. So very very impressive, very very likable. As a film.
Great film. I love that film.
Now, an American film, the choice might surprise you, but it's actually LA Confidential. Like
Oh,
in
yeah.
the
Another lovely film. Yeah.
the case of writer Ritesh Shah, it is when disillusioned, bored, panicky, whenever in doubt, play LA Confidential. I mean, it's obviously online. It's available online, but I actually have a Blu-ray and a normal DVD also. But there are so many screenplays I like. I mean, I just named these two. One, LA Confidential, because I revisit it quite often, and from a genre I really really like. October I picked up because I still remember the feeling the night after I saw the film. There are many more brilliant ones in contemporary times, also in Hindi as well as in olden times, and indeed in the West also. But because I didn't think too much about it, instinctively I picked these two.
Right, right. Could you quickly tell us a favorite scene from LA Confidential and why it's your favorite? Just any scene.
LA Confidential, so many scenes.
Right, just one. If I just trying to pick your brain so that I know that as to.
I have to really think hard. I think it's the misunderstanding and yet understanding it so well. I think it's the scene where pre-Christmas, I think Kim Messenger comes to pick up liquor, and she's hiding her face for entirely different reasons. But because she's a woman, Buzz is likely to think of it in a certain manner. So the whole observation in that scene, like instantly, I didn't think about it. That's the image which it really came running quickly. So I picked it up before I started thinking too hard.
Yes, yes, that's a great scene. I mean, like you said, that's a great movie, and there's so many scenes. I love the scene when Kevin Spacey's killed as well. That's a great scene too.
mean, there's so many great scenes in that film. Even the turnaround of characters who think you're or moralistic,
Right.
their choices. I think fantastic film. Such well-edged characters. Uh, mm, Wonderful, wonderful screenplay. I mean, if you're aspiring to write something in that space, in terms of thriller drama, I mean, that's a benchmark. Mystic River also, I think, uh, is another very very interesting film that I like a lot. I actually like a lot of Clint Eastwood's work.
And I noticed you mentioned Goldman a few minutes ago, and obviously, William Goldman is a legend. What's any favorite picture?
Uh, I think Butch Cassidy. I mean, everyone loves that film. Then the very next one, The Sting, another favorite. I'm also a great fan of both the books that he has written. They
Oh
inform
yeah, 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 yeah.
a lot
I
of
haven't read the first one. I have read the Which Lie Did I Tell?
my adventures in screen.
Right, right, right.
Great. So yeah, great books, great writer, great advice on adaptations. One of the best books written by a writer for writers, I feel. I mean, he's of course encapsulating his own life, but it's fantastic as to how it guides other writers without obviously trying to tell them to do so. He's just saying that this is my
Mm.
process of adapting a book, but it's such a fantastic process that you can learn so much.
And I can't let a screenwriter go unless I've asked them this question. What makes Salim-Javed such great Hindi screenwriters?
See, to give them credit, I think one, they were very well read. Both came from sort of illustrious backgrounds and were very fond of reading and had read quite a bit. Uh, then the power of two such minds, aligning in a world which was kind of ideal, free from many, many distractions. I mean, if you were to discuss entertainment at the point that they were writing, what was it? You could either read or you could watch a movie. So they read and they saw a lot of movies, and uh, a lot of their work is actually adaptations. Diwar clearly is an adaptation of Mother India.
Right, right.
Dawn clearly is an adaptation of Chinatown. Diwar clearly, I mean, again, Ganga Jamuna, the influence is very clear. The Westerns influence Sholay. There's so many influences, but I think they had a terrific sense of screenplay. I mean, some of their work is timeless. You still enjoy it as a fictional creation even now. Lovely, memorable characters, great wit, deep sense of hurt in both the people in terms of things that they had loved and lost in their lives. Just a terrific combination of an older and younger guy also. It's just like, I mean, almost everything is perfect. Salim Zabir is in his 30s, this guy is in his 20s. Uh, Both have lost their mothers early. Javed Saab has a fractured relationship with his father. Salim Saab lost his father early, but he was a cop. So he knew a lot of the world of, police world.
The
And
crime
then
world, right?
and their sense of cinema. Screenplays are compelling. I mean, just a great combination through
And they
the
also
set.
understood the technicals of the Hindi film of that period so well, right? Like, for example, the intermissions. I mean, the intermissions in Salim Javed films were just a thing of beauty. I mean,
Even transitions. I mean, I don't think earlier screenwriters paid so much attention to, like a dialogue cut, or they used both film and literature to create a better enhanced world of Hindi mainstream cinema. I mean, the cut points, if you look at it, they're so well worked out that he'll say this and suddenly we'll see a train going. Everything is so well worked out. The plants and the payoffs are kept so much. And I think it's just that there were two of them. I mean, we are up against a very, very powerful, formidable combination. I'm not saying we're good. I mean, but I'm saying it would be better if there were two of us.
Right, right. Great, great, Ritesh. This was great. That's all I had. But if you want to add anything from a screenwriter's point of view that might help aspiring screenwriters or students who, budding writers, that would be greatly appreciated.
I think the thing that I always would like to say at the end of all this is that this is my process, this is my world, these are my films. You will come up with your own things, and therefore you must disregard all advice, whatever has been written before, whatever has been taught. You will come up with your thing if you're very driven. See, only two things can drive you: either the ambitious of being featured on the marquee or on a big screen as a screenwriter, which is not bad, by the way. A lot of people come to this world because of that. Or you're so driven that no, I mean, this is a movie. And in that process, disregard whatever you have been taught by me or whatever has been said by anyone, how to get my name on the marquee or how to get that story told. Do whatever it takes. You could combine ideas from various people, you could create fresh ones, and then just try and do it.
Great advice. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, everybody has to hone their skills their own way.
We will, it's just like actors. I mean, everybody will come out eventually with their own methods and what works for them. Of course, it's a great idea to read everything that has been written or to hear whatever has been said about it, but then eventually come to your own choices.
Thank you so much, Ritesh. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, Himanshu. I always enjoy talking about films. So
Thanks a lot. Maybe we'll do this again sometime and do kind of a deep dive into one film. But thank you so much.
thank you.
Guys, if you liked the episode, please do spread the word about this episode and the podcast. And don't forget to subscribe to the podcast wherever you listen to your pods. Also, do drop us a review in Apple Podcasts when you get a chance. You can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at loveofcinemasf8. That's the episode. This is Himanshu signing off. And like always, thank you for listening to the Love of Cinema podcast.